Hi, I'm Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, and very pleased to have with me Teresa, whichever you prefer, Schreiber Werth. And she has put together this book called Navigating the Pandemic, Stories of Hope and Resilience. Hello, Terry.
Hi, Gail.
Glad to have you with us. And tell me a little bit about this book. It's an anthology of stories. How did this project come about?
It came about because I'm a certified funeral celebrant. I've been officiating at funerals for over 30 years. And when I saw the refrigerator trucks in the parking lot of the Elmhurst Hospital in New Rochelle, New York, last spring, I was just overwhelmed by who was taking care of the families of the people in the refrigerator trucks. I thought it was horribly sad that those people had died alone without their families, but I just knew that those families were going through a completely different, more traumatic kind of grief than a normal. And so I decided I needed to do something. And I reached out to some of my colleagues. I called in a lifetime of networking favors and recruited people to write short pieces, either about their lived experience, their professional experience, their work with others, sort of what I call subcultures of society, specific groups. And I really wanted to focus on helping people cope and helping people heal and giving them some suggestions so that they would feel less alone.
So we're speaking in December of 2021, and the pandemic is still going on, but it's a whole different world. When you were putting together these stories, this was like the first 9 months of the pandemic?
Even shorter than that. It was about within the first 4 to 6 months. I actually thought that I was finished with the book at one point. I didn't expect it to be 312 pages. I thought it would be about half that size. And that was when George Floyd was murdered. And there's nothing political about the book, but that incident became so inextricably linked to the pandemic that I couldn't leave it out. And so then I sought some writers to address those issues, which also kind of raised the issues about what disparities the pandemic revealed. And I don't mean created, I mean revealed. And all of this, in a very broad sense, has to do with grief and trauma.
Well, in fact, I was going to get to talking about the grief and trauma of this pandemic. So many people lost a loved one, had a loved one die in the hospital, alone, isolated. And this is still going on.
Right.
I mean, we're still losing 1,000 people a day. How can we cope with this rumble of loss and grief that's pervasive in our society now?
Well, that's exactly right. I was concerned that the book would be published, and there were delays in the publishing business because of the pandemic as well. And I was really worried that it was, by the time it came out, it would be irrelevant. Well, that turned out not to be the case. But I think the most salient point is that each of the things that we've lost, and we've all lost many, many things, and we all know what those are. I don't need to list them, and some people have lost more than others. But each of those losses registers within us as grief. And we're quite used to dealing with one grief at a time, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet, the loss of a job. But when you take those losses and you pile them on for going on 2 years, people can be severely affected, but they don't recognize it as grief. And so the ways that they may have normally dealt with grief don't come to mind. They don't think about some of the things that they could do or resources they could call upon to deal with that grief. I call it the unresolved grief and unrelenting grief, because it's been going on and on and on. And it's just a completely foreign experience to people.
One of the differences between the pandemic almost 2 years in now and those first 6 to 9 months was the whole lockdown concept, staying in your home, staying isolated, washing your hands. You know, we have mask wars that have been raging for sure. So in navigating the pandemic, we have sort of a glimpse of the world as we saw it in the early times when we were locked down. So what do you think, have things changed for the better now that we have vaccines and we have a little more mobility?
Certainly from a science point of view, things are better. I mean, in the sense that in the months covered by the book, we didn't have a vaccine. We didn't know if we would have a vaccine. So the element of fear and anxiety was certainly higher. But I don't think that people in general now are that much more at ease. I think we like consistency, we like convenience, we like what we're accustomed to. And I think people are trying very hard to get back to those things, all of those things. But I think there continues to be this underlying grief and trauma that besets us, even in spite of our best efforts. You know, I had stopped wearing a mask. I'm fully vaccinated. I've had my booster. And if we would go out, I had stopped wearing my mask. Well, now with this new variant, I decided it was time to wear my mask again. And along with that awareness, I think comes that familiar layer of loss. I've lost the ability to just go about my life the way I'm used to. I think about newborn babies in this era, and you know, what will they have a memory of every person or people wearing masks that's normal to them, to small children? I think that will be very interesting in the future to see how that plays out, because I don't think it still feels normal to us. It feels like a restriction, like a loss. So while it was more obvious in the beginning, I think it's become less obvious, but just as impactful on us.
So do you have some tips that people could apply to this grief that can help them cope?
Well, I think in the book, Andrew Penn, who is a nurse practitioner and accomplished grief manager, I guess I would say, from San Francisco, Andrew offers some really, I think, very specific suggestions about trying to create some routine in your life that feels more normal, trying to figure out ways to get outside, exercise, things that are not really rocket science, but they're things to try to get us moving. The big complaint I hear from people, my friends and just people in general, is, when will I get my energy back? When will I not be so tired? When will I feel motivated? And I experienced that as well. And I think that that's all a part of this cycle of being restricted and feeling as if we've had a lot of loss.
You have a charity partner for this book. Tell me about the Society of Refugee Healthcare Providers.
Well, it was very interesting. I was hoping to get one of the real major charities to be our partner in this. And the reason, you look for that is you want a charity whose logo you can use and name you can use to help promote your book. The big major charities, while I was able to speak to someone from all of those places, they wanted a guarantee of $10,000 to $50,000 in the first year of publication. And I had no delusions. This is not going to be a New York Times bestseller. So I couldn't do that. And so I looked further, and it turned out that one of our writers, Jim Sutton, is president or board chair of this 501(c)(3), Society for Refugee Healthcare Providers. And it's in the United States and Canada. And they work extensively with doctors, nurses, all the people that provide healthcare to refugees all over the world, actually. And when we made this decision, and Jim went to his board and asked them if they'd be willing to be our partners, and they agreed, we had no idea that there would be over 600,000 Afghan refugees resettling around the world who would all be in need of healthcare. And this organization will be key to providing and helping the people who provide that care. So it turned out to be more relevant than I ever could have guessed. I read something yesterday that said that a doctor said that they believe that the virus will always be with us, which is just a really disturbing thought. Although he was equating it to the seasonal flu, that sort of thing. But I think one of the real missions of the book is that we don't know how long it'll be with us. And the only way we know about what happened during the Spanish flu 100 years ago is because of what people wrote. And that's the reason, that is a secondary reason that I really wanted to collect all of these insights about migrant workers, about the elderly, about the incarcerated, about children, about just everything, so that this becomes a historical record of what we experienced those first several months. If everyone had journaled, it would have been a wonderful thing, but everybody didn't. And so I think this was a really important thing for us to put together.
In fact, I started my own journal, and I'm on my fourth book now of writing. I don't write every day, but usually several times a week, and making a point of not just talking about what's happening in my own personal life, but also on a broader scale in the wider world, about the pandemic, about vaccines, about travel. And yes, it's definitely worth. Journaling is also good for your own mental well-being.
Absolutely.
As well as keeping a record of what's happening during this time.
Right. I think that Lynn Aquifondata, who wrote a piece in the book, she's a professional counselor, and she also had some really good suggestions about ways to help yourself cope. And there continue to be the opioid epidemic collides with the COVID pandemic, and that whole situation has increased by over 30%. I do many more opioid funerals than I had, and I think that that's another indicator of how this has touched different parts of society in ways that may not be apparent to us. I think it's just become such a part of our daily life. And we sometimes discount it, or we try to put it in the background, and it's there, it's real. It affects every single thing we do. And I think people forget that.
So the book is Navigating the Pandemic, Stories of Hope and Resilience. Where can people find it?
Well, first of all, we're promoting your local bookseller, because we feel as if the small independent bookstores have suffered greatly during the pandemic. And so I would encourage people to go to them and ask them to order it through Ingram, and they can certainly get it for you. And then, of course, you can get it online at the major booksellers as well. So it's not hard to get.
Very good. Teresa Schreiber Werth, you're the editor and moving force behind this book. Congratulations. Thank you for putting this together and helping us chart our course through this pandemic.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to share it on behalf of the 38 writers in the book. They're from 11 states, 6 countries, and it's just a terrific collection, both practically and historically.
Thank you so much. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, do you have a website?
We do. It's Dandelion Book, just like one word, dandelionbook.com. And you'll see more information about the book. You can see our writers. There's wonderful diversity in our writers, ages 18 to 80, many different ages, ethnicities, men, women, high school students. It's a terrific group of people.
That is great. And just as a reminder to our YouTube viewers, I do have a playlist with interviews with other authors in the field of end-of-life issues, and I hope you'll check out some of our other book interviews on my YouTube channel. I'm Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death. Thanks for joining me today. Take care.